Beacon Press Audio presents What We Stand to Lose, Black Teachers, the Culture They Created, and the Closure of a New Orleans High School by Kristen L. Buras. This audiobook is narrated by Jasmin Walker, published by Beacon Press Audio, 2025. A poem by Amelie Prescott. Principal Moore, Lower Ninth Ward, New Orleans. Excerpt. In the library at the school, a young woman flaunts herself across the book-shelved floor. Dr. Moore comes upon her with her attitude. He invites her to leave. He places his hand on her shoulder. "Don't touch me," she snarls, shrugging him off. "I am clergy," he said, holding firmly. "I can touch you. I can bless you. I know your mama, too." Discipline in New Orleans. "I can touch you. I can bless you. I know your mama, too." Amelie Prescott, born 1942, passed 2023. A veteran teacher and founder of Most Chukma Arts as Healing Institute in New Orleans, wrote this poem after witnessing Dr. Lindsay Moore, principal of Martin Luther King High School and former principal and 1965 graduate of the historic Carver Senior High School, discipline a student in 2017. Chapter 1. They Don't Know the History. Why Remembering Carver Senior High School Matters. A quote from The History of Public Education in New Orleans Still Matters by Al Kennedy. One could reasonably conclude that prior to Hurricane Katrina in 2005, public education in New Orleans had no history, at least in the minds of post-Katrina reformers. The reformers do not mention the names of those teachers and students who came before, nor do they mention past accomplishments. They don't know the history. This helps to block from memory the efforts of determined individuals who spent their underpaid educational careers working against incredible odds to educate all children. A quote from Trines Mosley, a 1981 graduate of Carver Senior High School. "Those Carver teachers, they saw in you what you didn't see in yourself. They applauded that, and they always told you to think outside the box, that you can do this. You're better than this. The world was yours if you listened to those teachers." A quote from Mary Landrieu, U.S. Senator of Louisiana. "If traditional teachers and principals in a school can rally themselves and admit that they failed, they can be a part of the post-Katrina turnaround. If not, they can leave." The teachers, a majority of them Black, were terminated. All of them. In November 2005, about 3 months after Hurricane Katrina struck New Orleans, officials announced that 7,500 public school teachers and employees would lose their jobs in early 2006. It was an astounding move for a city that needed to rebuild its public school system. At least 80% of Orleans Parish public schools had been either damaged or destroyed during the storm. Most of the students were Black. Officials never asked students, parents, teachers, or others in the most deeply affected communities, where homes and neighborhoods were wiped out, what they thought should happen amid such destruction. Just the opposite. Plans for rebuilding began in elite, white policymaking and business circles before displaced Black communities could return to New Orleans or take part in the dialogue about what would happen to their schools. The reason became clear soon enough. City residents were informed that for too long, New Orleans public schools had been in shambles. Something had to be done for the good of the children. As it turned out, Black teachers were being blamed for the struggles of previous decades. They had failed the students. If only they had been caring and competent enough, all would have been well. Louisiana Senator Mary Landrieu told the Center for American Progress in 2011 that New Orleans teachers and principals should either admit culpability or leave. Of course, those in power terminated the city's teachers before they could meaningfully respond to such finger-pointing. Low standardized test scores and high dropout rates were pinned on the teachers quicker than lightning. While there was sufficient evidence that the city's public schools were falling short by traditional measures, no evidence linked those problems to the shortcomings of any teachers. The entire history of racism in New Orleans, including first denying enslaved blacks the right to an education and then strategically neglecting black public schools after their establishment, was never mentioned by officials. Neither were teachers and students asked how they viewed their schools, how they defined success and failure, and what was needed to eliminate existing challenges. Rather than providing evidence of alleged faults, officials fired teachers en masse without due process. A very simple equation was offered that defined the problem with the city's public schools and envisaged the solution. Past equals traditional teachers and public schools equals bad. Reform equals new teachers and charter schools equals good. To be clear, quote, new teachers and, quote, charter schools meant terminating veteran teachers and closing the public schools where they taught. Accepting this definition of the problem and the solution was problematic on many levels. Those in power were offering a version of the past devoid of history. It seemed important to determine if the dominant narrative met the historical litmus test. What did students experience in these, quote, failing schools? What kinds of teachers worked in the classrooms of New Orleans? What did they do or fail to do? And what exactly was the historical context in which the city's schools were situated? In the opening quote, historian Al Kennedy suggests that past accomplishments in New Orleans public schools have been ignored. This is not a minor point. Rather, it implies the narrative of failures rests not on historical evidence, but a series of decontextualized assertions about public schools. I set out to test such assertions with data by investigating the history of George Washington Carver Senior High School, including its post-Katrina closure due to alleged failure and charter school expansion. I collected archival documents and conducted oral history interviews with students and teachers, covering the school's 50-year history, from 1958 to 2005, when Katrina struck. Methods are detailed at the end of the chapter. I also documented the process of Carver's closure, which unfolded from 2005 to 2014. This history is important because the firing of veteran teachers and closing of public schools based on unsubstantiated allegations of failure are pressing concerns in New Orleans and many other cities. In communities of color across the nation, urban neighborhoods have been under assault by policymakers and privatizers seeking to replace experienced unionized teachers and close public schools by chartering privately managed ones and hiring inexperienced recruits to teach. Specifically, charter schools are public schools operated under charter or contract by private entities, often for profit, with limited state oversight. Carver, as a long-standing black educational institution, deemed a failure, closed, and replaced by charter schools, represents thousands of school communities nationally that have experienced closure or reconstitution as charter schools. Indeed, this destructive experience has occurred in Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, New York City, Camden, Newark, Milwaukee, Indianapolis, Cleveland, Boston, and Washington, D.C. It has occurred in Memphis, Nashville, Little Rock, St. Louis, Atlanta, and Houston. Phoenix, Oakland, and Los Angeles, among others, have not been spared either. This book lays bare what is at stake and fundamentally challenges the notion of failure at the heart of current urban school reforms. In fact, despite the broad assault on culture and civil rights represented by racially targeted school closures, the literature is relatively small. In a review of research on school closures, published from 2000 to 2019, scholars Eve Ewing and Terrence Green note that studies have documented how closures map onto race and class disparities, reflect racialized policies of privatization, and negatively affect communities of color. Other studies have documented community responses to closure. However, they find that research on the responses of the people most proximal to the immediate effects of closure, such as students, teachers, and school leaders, is largely absent. Further, it is evident that existing literature focuses on the process of school closure.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?